We're going to be going over this Bohr model and Lewis structure worksheet today. So there's quite a bit of information on here. So there's going to be moments where I ask you to pause, do your work, and then come back and just check your work. So I won't be going over directly all of them. I'm going to go over a couple of them, and then I'll show you the answer for the other ones. All right, so on the first one, Li. So on your periodic table, you will see that the atomic number for Li is 3. Your atomic mass for Li is 6.941. Your atomic mass, so we learned that finding the atomic mass, we can just take the atomic number and round it to the nearest whole number, and it gives us a very good idea of what the mass number would be. So 6.9, we're going to round that to 7. We know that our atomic number is equal to our protons, so that's 3. We take our mass number minus our protons, so 7 minus 3 to get our number of neutrons, which is 4. Our number of electrons, the same as our atomic number and our protons, so it's 3. Our group number, when we look at the periodic table, we see that groups go up and down. Li is in the very first group, so our group number is 1. Our group number also tells us how many valence electrons it has. So if it's in group number 1, we don't have to drop any numbers, and we see that we have 1 valence electron. The periods go side to side, so that means we are in the second period, and that tells us exactly how many shells that we have. So we come over here and we fill in our Bohr model. So we have, we have 3 protons, and we have 4 neutrons. Then we're going to fill in our electrons. So we see that we have 3 electrons. Well, we know that the first shell can only hold 2. So we put our 2 electrons in the first shell, and we still have, so we have 3 electrons total. We use 2 on the first shell, and then we're going to use 1 on the last shell. And we can check that by saying, okay, so that's our last shell furthest from our nucleus. That's going to be our valence electrons. We're supposed to have 1 according to our group number, and we have 1 on our Bohr model. So that means our Bohr model is correct. Then we're going to come over here to our Lewis dot structure. And in your Lewis dot diagram or your Lewis dot structure, you start out by writing the symbols. Then you just draw your valence electrons. And you start at the top. So you have 1 valence electron. There is our 1 valence electron, our electron dot diagram. So that's the answer for the very first one. Going on to Cl, we're going to start with our atomic number. That's found on your periodic table, and it's 17. Then we go to our atomic mass. We also found on the periodic table, and it's 35.453. We know that we can find our mass number by rounding the atomic number, so it's going to be 35. Our number of protons is the same as the atomic number, so that's 35. I'm sorry, it's 17. It's the same as our atomic number. That also tells us our number of electrons, which is also 17. Our number of neutrons is our mass number, which is 35, minus our number of protons, which is 17. 35 minus 17, we get 18. We look at our periodic table and we find our group number. Now, the group number for the periodic table, we're at the very end. We're not the last row, but we're the second to last row. So that's group 17. We can find our valence electrons by dropping the first number in our group number and keeping that second number. So if we have 17, we drop that 1 and it tells us 7. And that's our number of valence electrons. Then we go to the period number. Remember, those go side to side. So those are your rows. The groups are your columns. Periods are your rows. So Cl is on row 3. And that tells us exactly how many shells we have with 3 shells. We go over here and we fill in our Bohr model. We have 17 protons and 18 neutrons. We're going to start drawing our electrons now. So in our very first one, we know that we have a total of 17 electrons. We can only put 4 in the first shell. So that means we took two, oh, I'm sorry, we can only put 2 in the first shell. So we took 2 away, which means we have 15 left. Well, we can only put 8 in the second shell. So we're going to go clockwise. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. After we put the 2 in the first shell and 8 in our second shell, that means, and I'm just going to move down here. So we started out with 17. We took away 2, which left us with 15. Now we've taken 8 out of that 15. So we're going to have 7 left. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're in our last shell, which makes sense because our period told us we should use 3 shells and we should have 7 valence electrons according to our group. And we do. We've used 3 shells, and our last shell, which holds our valence electrons, has 7 electrons in it. We've put 7 in, so that means we have 0 electrons left, so our Bohr model is correct. Now we do our Lewis dot diagram. We start out by writing our symbol. Then we start drawing our electrons. And we draw only valence electrons with Lewis dot diagrams. You start at the top and go clockwise. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. After you've filled up all 4 sides, you start doubling them up, going clockwise again. So you have, that's 4, 5, 6, 7. So you've drew all of your valence electrons, and you've done your Lewis dot structure. Okay, going down to aluminum. So on aluminum, we have the atomic number being 13. Our atomic mass, which is found on the periodic table, is 26.982. Our mass number, we're going to round that to 27. Our number of protons is the same as the atomic number, so it's 13, which is also the same as our electron, which is 13. Our mass number, which is 27, minus our protons, which was 13. So 27 minus 13 gives us 14 neutrons. On our periodic table, we look at our groups, which are the columns, which go up and down. And we are in group 13, which tells us that we are going to have 3 valence electrons, because remember, in your groups, you drop that 1 to tell you your valence electrons. Then looking at your rows, we're in row 3, which tells us we will be using 3 shells. We start filling in our Bohr model. So our protons is 13, our neutrons is 14. We start filling in our electrons. So we're starting out with 13 electrons. We can only put 2 in the first row. So we took 2 away. 13 minus 2, we now have 11. Well, we can only put 8 in our next row, which means we're going to have some left over. We go clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We put 8 in our second row, which means that we started at 13, we've put 2, we've put 8, so I mean we still have 3 electrons left over. And we know that we can fit 3 in our last shell. So we put 1, 2, 3. We check to make sure this is correct. So our information over here tells us that we will use 3 shells. We did, and we should have 3 electrons in our last shell, and we do. So we are done with our Bohr model. Now we're going to go to our Lewis dot diagram, and we're going to put in our symbol, which is Al. Then we start drawing our valence electrons. We have 3. We start at the top and go clockwise. So 1, 2, 3. And there's our Lewis dot diagram. So now I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go and complete the second page and then come back and check your work. This is for the second page. As you can see, fluorine, you have your 9 protons, 10 neutrons. We've put 2 electrons in the first shell. Then we've put our last 7 in the second shell because we had a total of 9 electrons. Then we've got our 2, 4, 6, 7 dots on our Lewis dot diagram. Sodium, you have 11 protons, so that's 2 in the first, A in the second and 1 in the third. We can check it by our 1 valence electron and using all 3 shells. Our Lewis dot diagram only does valence electrons, so we've got the 1 valence electron. Our helium, there's a small kink in helium. So if you'll look down here, helium is in group 18 because of those physical and chemical properties that are similar to the group 18 elements. However, it only has 2 electrons. So that means we're not dropping the 1 for our 8 electrons, valence electrons. We only have 2. So that means we're only going to have 2 valence electrons. So we put 2 in our first energy level, and then there's no other shells, just like our period tells us. And our valence electrons, so our Lewis dot diagram, we will only have those 2 valence electrons. So pause your video and check this information.